targeted at any one person in particular. Just there was a few. It wasn't just one person. There was a few people this time. But if you're feeling guilty right now, this was a friendly warning. Don't make it have to become an unfriendly warning. All right. So we left off. Everybody should be on their master branch. We just merged all of our add item code. What we want to do now is display a single item. And I know we've done this in the other to-do list, but the whole reason of doing this again is because now we're going to do it with Redux, and you're going to see the full use of the Redux cycle again. When we use the add item, if you noticed, we didn't worry about doing anything with the reducers or anything like that. We did an action creator for it, but we didn't go through the whole process with the add item. That's because we didn't need to do anything with the response from the server from add item. It didn't even actually have to be an action creator. Okay? We could have actually just imported Axios into our add item component, made the call there, sent the data. So why put it in the actions index file? The answer is just to keep everything together. That's where all of our network requests are being made. So it's only fitting to do it there as well and do it still in the same form that we're doing all of our other requests. It doesn't have to be there. But a lot of times people will still do it there, once again, just for consistency. Okay? Because once again, it's not actually directly updating the Redux state. It's not, it doesn't need any information from the Redux state. It's not pulling information from the Redux state. It's not affecting the Redux state at all. We made a type for it. We returned that object, but we never handled that type in the reducer because we didn't need to. Because once the item was added, it redirected back to the home page. The home page then called the server. That updated the Redux state. So sometimes you'll run into scenarios like that. And it's still okay to do what we did, where we still created an action for it. We still set it up like it was going to be used, but we never did. Now, the other benefit to doing this is now if we decide we want to do something with this information, it's all ready to go. So let's say this request takes a really long time. Well, we could then use the Redux state and trigger, like as soon as the call's made, we could flip a flag inside of the Redux state saying, hey, add item's been submitted. And then once the response comes, flip it back to, it's no longer being submitted. So that would give us the ability to display like a spinner or some kind of loading or just like message like adding your to-do item, disabling the button, doing all kinds of different stuff with that information. So you might eventually use this information, but you don't have to. So we just set it up just in case. Plus, it keeps everything nice and uniform. All right, moving on to single item view. So we'll create a new branch. We'll do git dugout -b, and we'll say single -item -view. All right. I'm going to clean up my files here. And I'm going to go to my actual list. So our list is what displays this list right here. And we want to be able to click on one of these and have it take us to the single item page. So first thing we want to do is create a basic component and set up the routing for that page. So over in our file structure, inside of components, we'll create a new file, and we'll say single _ item.js. And then same question as always, do we need state? Don't need component state in this case. Do we need a lifecycle method? Yes, because when the component mounts, we need to be able to make a request to the server to get the data to display on the page. So we do need a class component. So import React component from React. We already know we're going to need Redux because we're going to need to update the Redux state to get the single item data into the Redux state. So we're going to need to update the state, and we're also going to need to pull the information from the Redux state so we can display that information. So we can go ahead and just right out the gate, we'll go ahead and import connect from React-Redux. And then we'll make our skeleton of our component. We'll say class, single item, extends component. I missed something in there, component. And then we'll render, return, div, each one. And at the top, we'll say to do item. And then lastly, we'll export default and then connect. We're going to connect creates those two arguments. First would be map state to props. We don't have that yet. And we also don't have any action creators yet, so we don't even need to give it the second argument. We'll just leave it kind of not doing anything at the moment. And then that's going to return a function. We're going to call that function and pass it our component. So ultimately, we know we're going to need Redux. So go ahead and throw connect down there. But we don't have all the information yet to put into place, so we could just do that. That's enough for us to start testing stuff. Our component should still show up. But it's in place for when we're ready to start plugging more stuff in. Everybody good here? All right. So now let's create a route for this. All of our routes are defined over in app.js, so we'll jump over there. We will import our newly made component, import single item from this directory, single item. We'll make a route for it. Path equals. Now, for this path, we need to be able to store the ID of whatever item we're viewing. So you want to be able to store whatever information you need to make your request to the server. Sometimes it's more than an ID. Sometimes it might be like whatever someone typed as a search term. You might need to store that in your URL. There's all kinds of different information that could be stored in there. In our case, we just need an ID. So we'll say /item/ and then to make a URL parameter, we use colon and then whatever name we want to give it. In this case, we'll just say item ID. And then component, and then pass it our single item component, and then close that out. And remember, if you need to store more than one piece of information in URL, you could tack as many things on here as you need. You can, whatever information you need to store in your URL to make sure that if the page is refreshed, they will be seeing the same data every time. All right. So let's test our route out, make sure it is working. So we'll make sure everything's saved. jump over to the browser, and we'll go to /item, and then / whatever you want. Any characters after I, doesn't matter. And then you should see your to-do item that I forgot to center. Shame. Anybody not get their single item page to show up? Everyone's all good? First thing we need to do before we do anything else is center this header. That is the most important task at the moment. All right, so in single item on the H1, we'll say class name equals center. Much better. All right. Now we want to make it so our list has all the links into it. So we'll jump back over to list. Everybody good here? Everybody got their page showing up, right? All right, so here's our LIs. This would be a good place to make a separate component. We don't have time to do all that. We did that last time. Normally I would make this another component, but for now we're just going to kind of shortcut it and just do everything here. Making it into another component. The only benefit is just to kind of help separate stuff out. Once again, there's no actual programmatic or performance benefits to doing it that way. It's just to kind of help organize stuff a little better. All right, so our item title, we want to surround that in a link tag. It looks like we already have link imported into this component because we're already using link, but I'm going to double check up at the top. Sure enough, there's link. So right here around our title, I'm going to say link. And then I'm going to take this, put that inside of link. Okay, so we have our link tags, and we just put item title inside of link. And then we need to tell it where to go when it's clicked on. So we'll say to equals curly brackets, backticks, and then /item, / then we need the item's ID. So we're already using it for the key, so it'll be the exact same thing. Item dot _ ID. That will generate the proper URL. So when we click on it, it should take us to /item / that long ID that each item gets. That ID in this case is generated by the database. Okay. This backend is using a MongoDB, and that is just the ID that the MongoDB is generating. Whenever you add a new item, it generates an ID. That is the ID we're using to identify each item. All right, let's try this out. So I'm going to go back to my list. Everything's blue. That's a good sign. And click on one of my items. And then it should take you to do item. You should see up in your URL, you have /item / some crazy number.
Mine says item / undefined, but it still brings me to the same page.
Yeah, because it doesn't matter what follows it. But undefined means you didn't set your ID properly. It means whatever you put there, output undefined. You did capital I. Should be lowercase I.
In the ID?
Yep.
Oh. Okay.
Mm-hmm. Everybody good? Everybody got the ID up in the URL? Cool. All right. So now that we have the ID in the URL, we could pull the ID from the URL, use that to make a request to the server to get all the information about that particular ID. So first step, let's jump back over to single item. create our component did mount method and console.log item ID. So all of our routing information is in our props. And if we forget where to find our URL params data, we could just console log our props. Once we console log our props, we can see everything that's being added. And then we just need to find out where params is at. So history, LMNO push, no param, so it's not in history. Go to location, HP path name. That's not what we're looking for. I know where it's at. And then if we go to match, there's params, and we can see right there, clear as day, item ID, and there's that big long number. That is exactly what it is up here. Okay. So props.match.params.item ID will give us our ID. So this .props.match.params.item ID. And then we'll verify that we did that correctly, check our console log, make sure we see our ID there. I highly recommend always console logging this information out before you try making the request. I still do it. I'm pretty sure I know where this stuff is and how to get to it. I still double and triple check it though. Because if your request fails, at least you know it's not the ID's fault. You know you're getting that ID. So you know to instantly go to somewhere else to look for the error. So you should see item ID and then your actual item ID console log.
Getting undefined even though I'm typing the name correctly. Oh no, never mind. I think I figured it out. Oh, we're good. Never mind.
That was wild, right?
Rule number one of programming. Almost never is it the computer's fault. I was a big fan of blaming the computer when I first started. Something's wrong with the computer, man. I know this code's correct. No possible way it could be wrong. What's up, man?
In my parameters, just getting
probably something wrong with the route definition. So go to app. Yeah, so do /item/. There you go. You could do it that way. You would have just had to fix your link to be just / whatever the ID was. That would have worked as well. But you'd end up with a couple other issues with the add item page and stuff. Okay, everybody got their ID? Cool. So now all we need to do is set up the Redux so we can make the request and get the data.
okay.
So whenever we're updating the Redux state, we need to make an action creator, which dispatches an action. An action has to have a type property, so we'll go to the types file. And we'll add a new type. We'll say get single item. All the single items. All right, so now that we have our type defined, we could go make our action creator. And for the most part, it's going to follow the exact same pattern we've already been doing. So down at the bottom, export function, it single item. What information do we need from the outside world? The ID. And then const response equals Axios dot, what are we doing here? Getting information, so get backticks, $ curly brackets, space URL, / photos. And now this time we need another / and then $ curly brackets, our ID, and then we need to add our API key onto the end of that. You could also do it as, if you're just, you really like $ and curly brackets, you could do it that way. It's going to do the exact same thing. Either way is fine. Once again, I always err on the side of less typing. That saves you like 1 or 2 keystrokes. What's that? All right. And just like before, return our action. Let's have a type, no S. Watch those S's. From the types object, that one has an S on it, which is, I think, where the confusion always comes from. Get single item. Payload is our response. All right. So now that we have our action creator for getting the single item, this will get to the reducer, and we actually do need information from this response. That's the whole reason we're making this particular call, is to get information from the server. So we need to do something in the reducer to update our state with the given information. So now that I've created my action creator, I'm going to go handle it in the reducer. So I'm going to go down to my list reducer. So list reducer inside of the reducers folder. And I'm going to make a new case, types.get single item. Right now, I don't really know what my server data is going to look like, so I want to check it. So I'm going to say console.log single item action. And for now, I'll just return state unchanged. That way it won't break anything. We could just use the fall through of a case statement. We don't actually need the return state, because then it'll just fall to the default return state anyways. But we're going to eventually need this return statement here, so I might as well put it there for now. But for any of the smarty pants in the crowd, yes, I know it doesn't have to be there. I might flip a table if one more student tells me that, actually. I'm totally kidding. I'd only tip the table, I wouldn't flip it. All right, so now all we have to do is call our action creator, pass it our ID, and then we should see our console log, hopefully with our items data in it. Everybody ready for that part? Are we good? All right. So in our actions index, we just defined our get single item. So we need to import that into our single item component. So at the top, import curly brackets from package directory actions, and then get single item. Notice I very intentionally always, especially like with the actions and stuff that I defined, I always write out the import statement, then jump back to what I'm importing. I let the autocomplete make sure I don't typo it. All right, now that we have that imported, we're going to come down to connect. We'll add our second argument to connect. Make sure you're inside the first set of parentheses. So we have null is the first argument, comma, second argument is our action creators, which in our case will be object form. And we'll say get single item is equal to get single item. All right, now we should be able to properly call get single item, and it should be all nice and plugged into the Redux cycle. So we'll say this dot props dot get single item, parentheses, and then we need to pass it our ID. And remember, our ID is at this beast. This dot props dot match dot params dot item ID. Okay, should match exactly what your console log is. You could even copy and paste it from your console log. All right, that should complete the Redux cycle. We should be making calling our action creator. Our action creator is calling the server. Our action gets dispatched, and then the server response gets passed into the reducer. Where right now, all we're doing is console logging that out. So we should be able to see, if it worked, our server response. So right here, we have single item action. We see our type, get single item. And then we have our payload. So we come down, we check out our payload. Here we have our server response. On our server response, we have data, and then we have to do. Notice there's no S because it's a single item, so to do. And then we have all the information about that to do item. Complete, completed, created, details, title, the user ID. No idea what the underscore B is, and then the ID. Maybe that's the version or something. Put the Mongoose button there. Did everybody get their item? Cool. So now that we know what our data looks like coming back from the server, we could use this information to update our Redux state now. We're just one step away from doing that. We got all the data all the way to the reducer. Now we just need to rebuild the state of what we want to return. So I'm going to jump over to the list reducer. And instead of just directly returning state, I'm going to return a new object. I'm going to say dot, 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 state. And then we already put a single property up in our default state. So that is the property I'm going to change. And say single. And I'm going to set that action equal to the data that we just saw in the console, action dot payload dot data dot todo no S. Okay, this should successfully update our Redux state, now be containing that information. Okay, we called the action creator. The action creator called the server, and then the action ultimately gets passed into here. We catch the proper type and update the state according to the type that was dispatched. Okay. So we could see if this worked by jumping back over to our single item component. Does anybody still need a second here? I am actually, before we leave here, I'm going to delete this console log because we're going to be doing new console log, so I don't want to confuse them. All right, so back over to single item. I now want to pull information from the Redux state. Okay, we use action creators to change the Redux state in some way, to update it, change it, add data to it, to change the Redux state. That's what the action creators are for. Bless you.
Thank you.
To pull data from the Redux state, that is what map state to props is for. That is its sole purpose, is to pull information from the Redux state. So down here above my export, outside of my component definition, I am going to make my function map state to props. That will get the state passed to it. And then I'm just going to console log state. And then for now, return an empty object. And we never used it. So we're going to replace null inside of connect with map state to props. Always forget that part. All right, let's try that again. So you can see we have our form data, we have our list data. So if we expand this out, our form data is empty right now because we're not using our form. But if we go to list, over in single, we have all of our data. If I go back to my list and then click on one of these, now my list data, I have all my list data here. Okay, because I looked at my list, the list got loaded, so all of that data is there, and I have my single item data. Okay, the Redux state doesn't clear unless you clear it. Sometimes that's good, sometimes it's a pain in the butt. Here, it doesn't matter that we're still carrying around our list data with us.
Scott, could you go back to single item?
Yep. Can you see down on the bottom or a different part? That's fine. You have to go back to the list and then back to single item to have data in it. Yes, sir.
I'm getting a 422 there.
Unprocessable entity. Typo in your URL, most likely. So go over to Actions Index. Get single item.
It's here.
Type on the API key looks like. Now remember, yours is just ID. Yep.
I think I have a typo somewhere where I can't, my sentence coming out is undefined.
Signals coming in. Let's see if it's made it right this way. Looks like you're missing the forward slash. So over in index.
Yeah. I'm gonna complete the data. So that it's like we can treat.
There you go.
Put that into an object.
Get you.
Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you.
All we have to do is change that.
Anybody else have any trouble? Everybody got the console log with single having data in it, correct? All right, so when we console log our state, we see if your array is empty, that's fine. That was just because I went back to the list and then came back here. But if I refresh the page, my array will be empty as well. Okay, but we do have data on single items. So state.list.single gives us this object. So over in our map state to props in our return, we want to add an item property onto our props. And we want that item property to contain our single information, which comes from state.list.single. And now if I delete this console log and put a console log into the render method, and I say this dot props dot item, because item is what I called it right here. So that's what it'll be in my props object. I can see single item, and there is all my data. So single item, the first time it runs is empty. After it calls the server, updates, then I have all my information in props. Okay. I'm going to delete the console log from component did mount. And then below my H1, I'll throw like a H3 title. I don't have to type this dot props 9,000 times. I can say const curly brackets item equals this dot props curly brackets item dot title item dot details. No, this won't be pretty, but it should work. Yes, sir.
Getting undefined for my single item.
Okay, come take a look. All right, if the rest of it worked, you should see your item title, your item details. If you go back to your list, it should update to the new information. There is one downside that you'll see. If you look ever so quickly, you'll see that the old information was still there, and then it updates to the new information. We'll talk about how to address that in a second, or actually probably after lunch. But I want to go around and make sure everybody gets to this point first. Let me go back to leave the code on the screen. It would probably be a lot more helpful for you guys. Was it there when console log state? Did you have it? Oh, okay. Just as okay. So let's go ahead and console log the state. Okay. So let's go over some network. And there's the forward slash as well. So let's go to actions index. And then choose forward slash. There you go. There you go. So you should be able to finish up displaying the title and details. Anybody else have any issues? Make sure you have the title and details displaying. I want to fix the issue of it showing the old data still. Okay, this becomes a bigger issue depending on your server round trip time. Okay, you don't necessarily want the old data to show up and then it change to the new data. That's no good for anybody involved. Everybody's good? Sure? All right. I'm just going to do this really quick and then we'll go to lunch. Okay. So just to reiterate, if I go back and then go to a new item, see how it blinks? Because it's briefly showing the old data for half a second. It's really fast. But like I said, it can take longer. And so the whole thing we want to do is when we leave this component, we want to clear the Redux state of the single item data. That way, when we come back to this page, it'll be blank until the new data loads and we won't see the old data. This is also beneficial for if you're doing a spinner or something like that. That way, your spinner, once again, knows to trigger itself because you're probably checking to see if the data is there. And if the old data is there, your spinner's not going to show up because it's like, hey, there's data there. What are you talking about? It's the wrong data, but there's data there. So we want to talk about really super fast, clearing this data when we leave this component. And anytime we're making changes to the Redux state, we do it with an executor. You know what? Let's actually do this after lunch because it's going to take it's not going to be really quick. And it'll be like 10, 15 minutes, but still. We'll pick up after lunch. We'll talk about how to reset the Redux state for certain parts, and you'll run across needing this when you're actually using Redux, because you'll go to a page and it'll display the old data, and then the new data will load. Nobody wants that, so we'll address that, and then we'll take a deep dive into middleware and recreate Redux Promise middleware on our own. And then, time permitting, we'll talk about higher order components, and we're going to start a new project where we get a random movie quote from a server, but you have to be authenticated before you can do that. So you have to sign in, create an account, all that stuff. And then before you can get your movie quote, you have to have an account. So that's what we'll be working on at the end of today and the next couple days. I'm with you guys, okay? I believe Tuesday and into Thursday, because Tuesday we only have part day because we have mentor meetings and all that stuff, and then Thursday I think I only have you for part of the day as well. Or no, Thursday's Firebase. I have you all day Thursday. We're going to be building a chat app, or we can do another to-do list. But I figure most people would rather do a chat app, even though it's the exact same thing. All websites are to-do lists. Some fancier than others, but they're all to-do lists. If you can understand the concepts that are conveyed in a to-do list, you can pretty much build any website out there. I mean, from Facebook on. All you're doing is sending data to a server, pulling data from a server, displaying it. That's all any app is ever doing. Now, I know that's a huge oversimplification, but it's still the truth. All right, I'll see you guys about 2:10. And for you in YouTube land, this will carry on and wrap up in part 6, I believe. Part 6.